After an ISIS-inspired terrorist killed 14 people in New Orleans, President Joe Biden is under fire for repeatedly downplaying the threat in recent years, and instead saying this is the greatest danger to national security. Watch.
According to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists. According to the United States intelligence community, domestic terrorism from white supremacists is the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland. The most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
The White House pressed on Biden's comments earlier, but instead just walked away.
Thanks, guys.
I got one from Fox.
Thank you, everybody.
Does the president still consider white supremacy the greatest terrorist threat to the United States?
Gotta love Lucas. All right, the backlash comes as the FBI and DHS issued a joint warning urging America's 18,000 law enforcement agencies to be on alert for copycats influenced by the terror attack on Bourbon Street. Meanwhile, Speaker Mike Johnson is calling out the Biden administration for forcing the FBI to not prioritize the right things.
For 4 years now, the Biden administration has taken its eye off the ball. I mean, they did not prioritize, in our view, the right things. And the FBI was off doing all these various and sundry things, putting their emphasis in their investigations and their eye on, conservative Catholics and concerned parents at school board meetings and all these other things. They tried to convince us that the greatest threat to the homeland was racially motivated extremism.
Judge, is it actually white supremacy, or like the speaker says, conservative Catholics and concerned parents that the Biden administration has focused and turned into what they say is a great threat?
Well, I think anyone who's looked at the news for the last 4 years knows what the Biden administration's agenda is. And, the fact that they would even compare ISIS to, the white supremacists, as though there's any kind of connection there. And when they're at the same time so quick to rule out terrorism, it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. I think we talked about this yesterday. At Fort Hood, oh, that wasn't terrorism. This wasn't terrorism. But, the white supremacists are the ones who are out there. When we had the Pulse nightclub in 2016, San Bernardino in 15, a bike path in New York City. All that's we have all that.
Yeah, we have them right here, and we can pull this up, I hope. And it's a big number. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Those are ISIS-related terror attacks. But this is a party and an administration that has an agenda, and the agenda is a narrative, and you've got to fulfill the narrative. And if it's not part of the narrative, then it's not real. And you remember this administration came in. One of the first things they did, Anthony Blinken went to the UN and said, you have to do a study and tell us how racist we are. I just remember hitting myself in the head and saying, what the heck are they talking about? But these people, there's no reason to compare one to the other, but that's just about their ideology.
Tyrus, in an effort not to go to you first on the race question.
You know what, and I appreciate that, but at the same time, I'm offended because that's the world we live in. I always find it funny when a person, he's saying white supremacy, a white man saying white supremacy is the problem.
Yeah.
But not him.
Yeah.
Because he's got his merit badge, he has BLM and his other stuff. So, but not him.
Interesting.
It's virtue signaling. But it wasn't about that. This was about January 6th. This was about starting to lay the tracks. You can't call a guy Hitler unless he has followers. So you continue to lay the tracks. You put party over people by saying the biggest threat was white supremacists. And who is the king of the white supremacists? Well, it's Donald Trump, President Trump. So this was part of the whole plan to get him out and not have the ability to come back. Clearly it did not work, but this was what this was about. So he would say the most dangerous thing that was facing us, because when you make believe monsters up, when you say things like global warming is an existential threat, things you can't prove, so it can go away when you want it and it can appear when you need it, that's what this entire administration has been, smoke and mirrors. And the American people, luckily, saw through the wizard's little curtain.
Yeah, Kennedy, I agree with Tyrus. And I think that if you're President Joe Biden and you've pulled out of Afghanistan the way he did and said, listen, we have over-the-horizon capabilities, we can keep an eye on what's going on. When you have your Homeland Security Secretary say the border is secure, when you've done those things, you almost have to have someone else to point the finger to explain why you're not working on these things.
Yes, and pointing the finger is incredibly important, especially when a homegrown terrorist has given you a roadmap for how to easily kill a bunch of people. So I think accountability and blame are critical in order to keep this city and other cities across the country safe. I'm going to read you a quote from our favorite Ann Kirkpatrick, the media darling superintendent of police in New Orleans, who said this: "This is not a matter of pointing blame anywhere. A terrorist is hell-bent on destruction. This man was going to do his best, and if it hadn't been on Bourbon, he was going to do it somewhere else. We have this. We're going to implement it. End of story." She had plenty at her disposal. She didn't know what it was. She didn't know it was there. She didn't know how to use it. The safety structures have half-assedly been put in place, and they've been put in place wrong. And with that mentality, you don't have to keep anything safe. Why have cops on Times Square on New Year's Eve? Because a terrorist is just going to find a way to kill people.
Yeah.
You know, why have police at all with that sort of mentality? How does she still have a job? There should be blame. There should be accountability. There should be resignations, and they should have happened 2 days ago.
I don't think she's going to have a job that much longer, but it's your turn.
Well, Jessica, that does bring me to this question. ISIS inspired this attack. Just hours after this attack happened, you have people here in New York City protesting on behalf of Gaza, using every kind of slur and negative thing you can say about Jews and Israel and this country for supporting them. And the president, that's our president now, he stood there and told us, hey, we're going to be able to keep these terrorist organizations at bay with our over-the-horizon capabilities. Do you not feel a little bit safer knowing that President Trump's going to take over?
That's a toughie for a Friday, Joey. I didn't know that's where we were going with
You can just
this.
ignore that last question.
Yeah, I
and
am going to
respond
ignore
it.
that last part of that. I'm very good at that. Listen, the country is reeling as it should. This is incredibly scary to know that an American, especially an American service member, could have been persuaded by jihadi ideology to the point that he would go out and do something like this. And I want to learn as much as possible about how that happened, and we'll hopefully get some more competency in managing the New Orleans case, which doesn't seem to be on full display. But the reason that President Biden and the administration and Christopher Wray, who was a Trump appointee, have been talking about the threat of right-wingers and far right-wing supremacy, whatever you want to call it, is because that's what the numbers bear out. And we put up all those numbers about how many people had been killed by jihadists, but it's not as many as those who have been killed by white supremacists. So the New America Foundation has done a breakdown in terrorist attacks since 9/11. It goes through 2023. We have to add the 2024 numbers once they're available, but you have 134 killed by far right-wingers, 107 killed by jihadists, 17 killed by misogynists or incels, 13 killed by black separatists or nationalists, and 1 killed by
How many killed by gang members? I
yeah.
mean, that's got to be on the list.
Okay,
Because
Let's
that's
put
a
how many
phenomenal
killed by
number.
illegals. You know,
That's-
let's add to the
we're-
list.
Those are
I wonder how many of
Listen,
those killed by white supremacists were killed in prison.
Yeah.
Look,
that's by
same.
suicide.
Oh.
I mean, because oftentimes they.
How many people fell off an ice cream truck? I
You brought
don't know.
You brought the numbers up.
But
I mean, you're
there-
countering the numbers that are very obvious.
No, well,
for-
we're not.
From
First
terrorist
of all,
attacks.
yes, they have their definition of a terrorist attack. They have the ideologies behind these terror attacks. I am not here to minimize
I know.
any. You do know? Great. We'll tell the rest of the
I
table.
don't think you're minimizing
yeah,
it, but
I'm
I
just
don't
saying
think
that the
it
numbers don't. But
I
it
don't
does.
think the argument holds.
Okay, then you should
I
speak to the New
don't think
America
the numbers,
Foundation.
I don't think
really?
the numbers are accurate.
Well, what
because
numbers do you
first
have
of all,
encountered
you're
that? Just
talking
saying,
you're
like-
talking about post 9/11.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
the
what do you
numbers
wanna
that
talk
we
about? You
have
wanna go back
is
to World
first
War
of all, no, is 2015 in terms of ISIS. These are the only numbers that we have collected. You want to go back
That's
to
not true.
2011? We can go back to that number.
Well, I wanna go
But
back
you're
to-
saying that the white supremacists have killed more people than ISIS.
In
Where?
America, we're talking about protecting
What
the
is a
homeland.
white supremacist?
It's
Is it a
person-
white
it's
guy who
Dylan
kills
Roof.
his wife?
No, it is Dylan Roof walking into the
That's a
Miami
white
church.
supremacist.
It's someone
Yes.
walking into
Yes.
the Tree of
Absolutely.
Life synagogue. It is someone walking into a Walmart looking for Latinos to shoot up. That's what I'm talking about when we're talking about white supremacists.
Okay, so if you're
And
looking...
jihadists are like the guy who just drove through New Orleans.
Okay, but I will grant you, it is terrifying that a U.S. service member who was discharged honorably is capable of this level of radicalization. We know he went to Egypt for 3 weeks to a month, and that's terrifying. We want to know what happened there. I'm more scared of the people who are pre-radicalized, the people who come into this country easily with an agenda who want to kill us all. Those are the people who really leave me up at night.
I'm not trying to minimize anyone who wants to do harm. I'm just saying to stand here and say that President Biden is out of his mind for talking about this.
Johnny, I have a question. I have a question.
Yeah.
What's up next?
It's not the end of
there
it.
we go.
And then it's going to be my block.
Up next, a stunning security failure in New Orleans. The city had barriers that could have prevented this attack.